Maybe you've been eyeing your neighbor's yard and thinking, how is it so green all year around? They don't even water it. What are they doing? What is their magic? Maybe you've been looking at yourself in the mirror and thinking, why am I pouring hundreds of gallons of fresh water into the ground for plants that will just live for a few weeks? Maybe you just want some more interesting plants that belong in this landscape. Or maybe you just want to see more native pollinators in your yard. No matter what brings you here, xeriscaping is your way forward. The word xeriscape comes from the Greek word xeros, meaning dry, and that really is the meat of it. You're just trying to use plants that can handle being dry and don't just die immediately and never come back. So what kind of plants are these? Oftentimes they're native plants, but also there's plants from around the world that can be really resilient to the long hot summers that we have in the West. It doesn't just have to be plants from your region, but really when you think about it, the plants from your region probably will do the best. So xeriscaping and native planting oftentimes overlap, especially in the context of dry areas, but for example, more humid parts of the country, like the Midwest, the South, native planting probably means much more water-intensive plants. So although these two terms overlap, they're not the same. The benefits of xeriscaping are that you have to irrigate less. You don't have to water these plants that are meant to be somewhere else. You get a lot more native pollinators, and most importantly, at least to me, is you're putting plants back where they belong, and you're pulling out that like Kentucky bluegrass you have to water 7 days a week, every week for the entire summer just for it to look scraggly and shaggy. Just pull that up and put something that actually was evolved to live here right in your yard, and it's just such a treat to see. You get such a unique looking yard. You get a yard that people really are talking about, and you get to feel good about it yourself. To break down the 7 principles of xeriscaping, I like to think about it in 4 overarching categories, and I think that these categories are much more holistic and really combine to make a better view of an overall landscape rather than individual pieces of it. So the 4 categories I think of are you, what you want out of your garden, what you can do for it, what you have going on already, the set things. So for example, if you already have land set aside for something, or if you have a large tree in your yard and so part of your yard doesn't have as much sun, and just kind of overall look at the sunlight that your yard gets, soil quality, and generally how you want your yard to be landscape wise. Kind of these set things where once the plants are in the ground, although you can move them, they're more or less set in place. So kind of thinking about things like that. Water, which is much more loosey-goosey, it's much more fluid, literally. Thinking, how much rainfall do I get? How xeric does my yard actually have to be? Or how much will I have to supplement to that? Because you can always add a drip system or just hand watering it, easy peasy. And then the 4th category are the plants, what we've all been working up to, and thinking really critically about what kind of plants you can get that you can support and that can support you and they'll meet your needs. Definitely a whole circle, and everything has to connect with one another. This summer I had a lot of pandemic free time. I graduated from college and then I had literally nothing. So decided to garden. I'm kind of making this video just as a bunch of things that I learned along the way and things that I wish I knew before I began. And so hopefully these tips and tricks can help you on your xeriscaping journey yourself. Before we start anything, before we get anywhere, let's take a minute and think about you. So what are your goals? Depending on your goals, you're gonna have really a very different xeriscape garden at the end. For example, if you're somebody who's just like, I want the wackiest garden in the entire world, you can get that. Your dreams can come true, but your garden will look drastically different from somebody who's like, I have kids and a dog and I need to have some turf. Taking a minute to think, where's my life gonna go? Thinking, where am I now? Where can I be? So when you think about what you want to have done with your garden, with your yard, with your life, think about how much maintenance you want to do. If you honestly don't want a garden you're never gonna touch again, that's great. Do it. You can make that dream come true. But if you're like an avid gardener and crazy about it, then you'll have different needs. So when you go through this, keep those goals in mind. My goals and obstacles. My goals were to fill in the space between 2 buildings with a walkway and then with xeric plants on either side of the walkway. I wanted to put in more color and more flair. So those were kind of my goals. Limitations were time. So I really was only going to be there for the few weeks where I was planting the plants. And then I knew that going further forward, I really wouldn't be the one maintaining the garden. I knew that time element of maintenance, I really have to cut back on to make sure that somebody else could do it. And my other limitation were finances. Although I did a lot of the work myself, the plants cost money. And so keeping that in mind and keeping it within reason, because obviously these grow and you don't need to spend all the money at once when you can just have time and patience. Other things to consider are your uses for the space. I didn't really have to think about having any other little critters going through, except for chickens, which I really should have thought about, but I didn't. Anyway, but I didn't have to think about like having turf set aside. I didn't have to think about making sure that the plants were non-toxic to animals. Also think about what kind of like wildlife you want to bring in. It might be nice to have a lot of birds nesting in your yard unless you have a cat or something like that, in which case you're doing a terrible, terrible thing. Don't bait these birds into your yard just to kill them. Think about all of these elements before you get started. Like that is the best way to guide you to the design that you'd like, and then also to ensure that the future maintenance is being thought about now, and so you're not surprised in like 10 years. Now we get to the set thing, and the most important set thing that I can think of is the sun. Yeah, you can prune trees, but there's really not a lot you can do with pre-existing buildings or like fences, neighbors' yards, things like that. A lot of different elements that will affect the sunlight that your yard gets, and a lot of plants are full sun plants, which means that they need 6 hours or more of sunlight. To determine what the best places in your yard for this would be, just take a day and pay attention from dawn till dusk, or from whenever you wake up till dusk. I'm not your mom. Pay attention to where gets sunlight, what the sunniest spots of your yard are, but also when they get that sunlight, because the sunlight that in the very early morning, like it's gonna have a very different temperature than plants that are getting their sunlight in the afternoon and evening. And so the plants that may be slightly less xeric might need a little bit more water or might not thrive in oven-like condition. Put them in a place that will get their sunlight in the morning versus plants that like you can do anything to them and they'll just love it. They love that heat, they love being crispy. Boom, they're perfect for afternoon. Once you've determined what spaces get the best light, think about other things that you want to do in that space that might be set in stone and might be difficult to move. For example, the path I put in between the two buildings, that was kind of like an anchor for the rest of the Xeriscape garden because I knew that that was like a permanent part of that. Once you know the sun conditions and you know what space is reserved for other things, then you can kind of set about to think about the soil that you're planting. They're made to live in the soil, so they're going to be fine. Unless you live in a super fun site, having the Xeriscape plants there will improve the soil quality. As the plants live there, more organic material will be deposited in it. Move on with it. Don't worry about it. Try it. The other thing, soil-wise, that fits in here is mulch, which, you know, some people recommend adding a layer just like 4 inches thick. And there's a variety of materials you can make into mulch, I guess, make mulch out of, and you can put it on the top to retain moisture, and it works really well. Like I'm not shitting on it, but I'm just not one of those people that enjoys mulch. I feel like it has like a very man-made look to it, which isn't really the vibe I'm going for. Plus, I really love seeing new pups coming out of the ground. I just get such a kick out of that. I think it's half the fun. When it comes to watering your Xeriscape, look to your environment first before you think about artificial watering methods. Even fairly dry environments get a few raindrops, a few clouds, you know, a few storms. So think about what your environment naturally has and try to plan accordingly, and also think creatively about how the water runs through your yard. If you have like ditches or gullies, or like you live on a hill or something, think about how the water will move through your yard and put the plants that need the most water in the places that they'll get the most. Also, if you still have turf, which is fine, you can use that water runoff from your yard creatively in order to feed some plants that aren't officially drought tolerant but you really love. Also creatively think about use of your rain gutters, because a lot of water is just being poured straight into the ground. Another option for when water isn't conveniently falling out of the sky are to get drip systems. Drip systems are uniquely good at watering xeric plants because usually plants used in xeriscaping have very deep roots. And so if you just go over them like you would a vegetable garden or something like that with a hose, not a lot of the water will actually sink down. And so doing a little bit of water over an extended amount of time is really the best way to water it. You can also just water these by hand. Get a bucket, just go for it. It's not that tedious, and I feel like depending on your level of involvement, either is fine. It's not like you're watering it super frequently. Just remember that it takes about 3 years for the plants get established. During the first year is the most intense time for watering, and then by the time it's the second year, it's significantly significantly less than the first year, but it takes until like the third year for them to be really independent. And so in your mind, just think about it as this first year, I've got to hold this baby's hand to make sure they're going to stay alive, they're going to be happy. And then after the first winter, they're going to be way more established, can keep an eye on them. And then third year on, they're just popping off. Now let's dig into the best part, which is obviously the plants. If you made it this far in the video, you thought about what you can do, your situation, the water requirements, and you get to pick out your favorite plants, the plants that really get you jazzed. I recommend native plants because obviously they're meant to be there, but there's also a ton of plants that fit very well into Xeriscape gardens that are from the Mediterranean, like Western Asia, South Africa, other dry environments throughout the world. And I think it's pretty neat that these adaptations have let them really thrive in so many places. I bought my plants from Dragonwing Farms, and it is the place to go if you're in Idaho. If you can make the drive, I definitely recommend. If you can't make it down to Dragonwing Farms in person, I recommend their website at www.water30plants.com. Up here, they have plants organized from smallest to biggest, and down here they have it organized alphabetically with their scientific name. And what I thought was really useful about this website is that they had a photo of the plant when it's mature, the size of the plant, where it's native to, and then I really enjoyed how this website clearly shows the watering needs and the blooming period of the plant. And over here, you can sort by when it blooms and other traits of the plant. So for example, if you know that you need a very shady plant, instead of going through page after page, you can just click on one of these categories and find an answer for your specific need. Another useful resource I used was from the Colorado Native Plant Society. And as you can see, this is more or less like the other guide, except it doesn't have pictures, But what I thought was useful about this was the wildlife value. And if you're planning on planting a pollinator garden, this is really the resource that you should tap into. Also, if you don't want to buy plants, you have the choice of finding somebody who already has a plant and then asking for a division, or buying plants now and then later on dividing plants. So most perennials, flowers, grasses, other things like that, you can split them apart, or they grow out a propagation, like a little pup or something like that. And usually you can detach that pup and then replant it somewhere else. So if you can find somebody who has a Xeriscape garden already and you say, hello, it is the springtime, I see that you are pruning your garden, could I have some bits? Most people are so nice, definitely do that. They'll probably be more than happy to share what they love with you. And if you can't do that, you can be that person and you can give the gift of a Xeriscape plant for free and really spread that love. Really, don't be so afraid of making a mistake that you don't do anything. And with smaller plants like those perennials, you can dig them up to divide them, and you can also just replant them, like just dig them up and put them somewhere else. Like, it's probably not the best thing for them, and it's not like you should plan on doing that, but don't be so afraid to make a mistake that you don't get started by planting something. Really just think about what you want it to be. Think about that 5-year mission in your mind, and think how you can make that happen, and learn from your mistakes. It's okay to make a mistake. Just learn from it and then do it better next year. Now you are as knowledgeable as I am, if not more somehow. I hope that you have time to check out the resources. I link them in the description, and I hope that you, coming out of this video, realize that xeriscaping is a lot more than just cacti in the desert, and xeriscaping is for everyone. It is for you. It is for anybody who has a bit of time and a bit of foresight and is willing to put in some time or effort. There's so many reasons to make the change right now. The best thing is just to try. It's all about growth, and if the plant's not growing, at least you are. So learn, do better next time, and know that every bit that you're doing to reduce your water waste and to reinstate plants and to be a little bit more wacky and cool is a positive thing. It doesn't have to be a competition. Any little bit counts.